Welcome to Sleep Whisper. I'm glad you're here tonight. Please set your volume to a gentle level, close your eyes, and let yourself rest quietly. Together, we'll drift into sleep as I guide you through stories that are calm, slow, and just a little bit boring, perfect for a peaceful night's rest. If you enjoy these bedtime histories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, so you can join us every night on this journey into slumber. Now, let us begin with the very first story in our Boring History for Sleep series, The Forgotten Gears of Antikythera. The sea around the small Greek island of Antikythera is usually remembered for its cliffs, the restless winds that sweep across the Aegean, and the clear water that hides so many forgotten fragments of history beneath its surface. Sailors once feared this passage, not because of storms alone, but because of the rocks that could break a ship apart in silence. It was here, more than 2,000 years ago, that a vessel heavy with treasures and cargo sank to the depths. Centuries passed, and the world above forgot, but the seabed held on to its secret, waiting for divers long after to stumble upon something unusual. In the early years of the 20th century, sponge divers from Greece, accustomed to descending into the cold sea for their living, discovered the wreck. They had expected amphorae, statues, and broken jars, and they did find those things: marble arms of statues, bronze figures green with age, pottery shattered by time. Yet among these artifacts lay a lump of corroded bronze, small, rough, and unimpressive. No one would think that within this crusted object was hidden a mechanism more complex than anything else from its age. It would later be called the Antikythera mechanism, and it would puzzle scholars for more than a century. When it was first examined, it looked like nothing more than a rock fused with bits of metal. Only as careful hands began to clean it, only as X-rays were later applied, did the truth begin to surface. Inside were gears, delicate, precise, cut with astonishing craftsmanship. Not one gear, but many, meshed together like the works of a clock, except centuries before the invention of any clock we thought we knew. The thought alone has kept historians awake, and yet for us tonight, it will help us drift into calm slumber. Imagine the divers surfacing with their heavy helmets, coughing out seawater, handing the strange lump of bronze to scholars who hardly glanced at it. Imagine the slow realization that the corroded mass was not ordinary cargo, but something that belonged to a mind far ahead of its time. In a way, the mechanism was like a whisper from the past, carried through the waves, reminding us that human ingenuity is older than we care to admit. The device seemed to have been built to track celestial bodies, to predict eclipses, to follow the cycles of the moon and the sun. A kind of ancient computer, resting at the bottom of the sea while the world above forgot. As you lie quietly, picture the patient hands of a craftsman 2,000 years ago, carving teeth into a bronze gear, polishing the edges, fitting them so that one moved the next, in an elegant chain of motion. There was no rush in his workshop, only the steady rhythm of filing, adjusting, checking the alignment. Outside, life in Greece moved on as usual, but inside, someone was creating a machine to measure the heavens. And when you think of it, this machine was not built in a world of factories or electricity or precision steel. It was built in a world of hand tools, oil lamps, and soft bronze. That is what makes it so strange, and yet so fascinating. Still, for our purpose tonight, it is a slow and simple story, a box of gears hidden in the wreck of a forgotten ship. You can allow the image to settle gently in your mind. The quiet sea, the patient diver, the scholar brushing away crust, the gear teeth glimmering faintly in the light. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, only the calm unfolding of a mystery that took centuries to notice. The Antikythera mechanism rests as a reminder that the past is never as simple as we imagine, and that even in forgotten places, something extraordinary may lie waiting, disguised as something ordinary. As the gears turn silently in thought, let your breathing slow and let yourself drift into the rhythm of the sea, steady, unhurried, timeless. When the fragments of the Antikythera mechanism were first laid out on a table in Athens, they did not reveal their secrets easily. They looked like broken shells, twisted and fused by centuries of salt and pressure, no more remarkable than other corroded relics that museums receive by the crate. Scholars cataloged them, stored them, and for a long time they were forgotten once again, resting not on the seafloor this time, but in quiet drawers of the museum, where dust slowly gathered and visitors passed by without notice. It took decades before anyone thought to look closer, to wonder if this crumbling block of bronze might be something far more unusual. Early attempts to study it were hampered by the limitations of the time. The gears were hidden inside layers of incrustation, and the tools of archaeology had not yet reached the precision of modern imaging. What could be seen, however, was enough to cause unease. Teeth of gears, arranged with intention, revealed themselves like faint outlines of a ghost. They were not random scratches, not chance formations. Someone had cut them with purpose. And not one or two, but dozens, each carefully shaped. The mind begins to wonder what kind of knowledge must have existed to create them. In the early 20th century, many scholars dismissed the idea that such complexity could belong to antiquity. They preferred to believe it was something medieval or even modern that had fallen into the wreck by chance. But the layers of evidence were undeniable. The mechanism had been found with statues and pottery from the 1st century before Christ, buried together in the same wreckage. It could not be explained away. And so, slowly, scholars admitted that perhaps the ancients had been capable of far more than we credited them. As years passed, and as new techniques like X-ray tomography were applied, the mechanism began to open itself like a puzzle box. Underneath the crust, hidden gears appeared, over 30 interconnected wheels of bronze, some large, some small, each with a role to play. They formed a system, a machine with a purpose. Careful reconstruction revealed that it could model the movement of the heavens, predict lunar eclipses, track the cycles of the Olympiad, and perhaps much more. It was not merely a clock, nor merely a calendar, but a fusion of both, an ancient attempt to capture the complexity of time itself. Imagine for a moment the scholars staring at the images on their screens, tracing the outlines of gears with pencils, building models out of cardboard, then brass, then digital simulations. Imagine the slow realization dawning on them, that this device represented a leap of thought centuries ahead of what we once believed. And yet, despite this wonder, the mechanism remains broken, incomplete, and silent. Only fragments survived, and many questions remain unanswered. Who built it? Was it the work of a single genius, or a tradition now lost? Was it crafted in Rhodes, where skilled astronomers once gathered, or in Corinth, or in some unknown workshop now forgotten by history? Did its maker understand how revolutionary it was? Or was it simply another tool in a world of knowledge richer than we imagine? These questions float without resolution, like waves that never quite settle. For us tonight, they are not mysteries to solve, but gentle uncertainties to rest upon. We let the thought drift, unhurried, that people long ago, with no modern machines, no electricity, no industrial tools, still carved bronze gears so precise they could mimic the movements of the cosmos. The image is simple, quiet, steady. A craftsman at a bench, the sound of filing bronze, the faint glow of a lamp, the turning of one wheel against another. Outside, the sea waits, and history marches forward. But inside that small workshop, time is measured differently. The fragments that remain in museums are like whispers from that room, carried through millennia, softened by corrosion, but not silenced. And as you lie here listening, you too can let your thoughts turn like those gears, slowly, gently, repeating their circles until the rhythm lulls you deeper into rest. The Antikythera mechanism does not demand answers tonight. It only offers its quiet company, a relic of patience and ingenuity, resting in your mind as you drift further into calm and sleep. As the 20th century moved forward and technology advanced, the Antikythera fragments received renewed attention, no longer ignored relics in drawers, but the focus of careful study. Scholars returned to them with X-ray machines, with photographs under different light, with patience that matched the centuries the object had already endured. Piece by piece, they mapped out the hidden structure, and the picture grew clearer. What emerged was astonishing. The mechanism was not a random assortment of gears, but a deliberate arrangement, an architecture of time. Some wheels were connected to represent the solar year, others to follow the cycles of the moon, others still to calculate eclipses with uncanny accuracy. The level of craftsmanship spoke of a mind deeply familiar with astronomy and mechanics, a marriage of disciplines that many had believed impossible for the ancient world. And yet here it was, corroded but undeniable. Consider the care it must have taken to create such a device. Each gear had to be cut with precision, each tooth aligned so that it would engage smoothly with the next. Without steel tools or modern machines, this required steady hands, sharp eyes, and countless hours of practice. The craftsman who shaped these pieces was not working blindly. He was guided by knowledge handed down, perhaps refined over generations, and by an ambition to capture the heavens in metal. Imagine him at his bench, measuring, filing, testing the fit, perhaps explaining to a young apprentice why the angle of a tooth mattered, why one wheel must have a certain number of teeth while another required more. In the quiet workshop, the sound of filing bronze would have mixed with the murmurs of explanation, a rhythm of creation both patient and deliberate. The result, once completed, would not have looked spectacular. To an untrained eye, it was just a wooden box with dials on the outside, small inscriptions carved to guide the user, and inside, hidden away, the gears turned in harmony. But when operated, the box could show the positions of the sun and the moon for years to come. It could predict eclipses. It could even align itself with the cycles of the ancient games that we now call the Olympics. It was both a tool and a wonder, blending science with a kind of quiet magic. And yet, despite its brilliance, the mechanism did not survive intact. We do not know if there were many copies or only a single one. We do not know how widely it was used, or how many people even understood what it was. The one that lay at the bottom of the sea may have been unique, or it may have been one of many that were once carried across the Mediterranean. The questions have no answers now, but they invite us to reflect on how much knowledge can be lost, how fragile human achievement can be. If such a machine could vanish for centuries, what else has slipped beyond our memory, leaving only faint traces? As you lie in silence, let the thoughts settle without urgency. It is not a puzzle to solve, but a gentle reminder that history is full of gaps, and sometimes those gaps are more soothing than answers. The Antikythera mechanism drifts in our imagination like a shadow of ingenuity, proof that the past is richer than we assume, yet also proof that much of it can disappear without a sound. For the divers who pulled it from the sea, it was heavy, awkward, almost disappointing compared to the statues and treasures beside it. For the scholars who later studied it, it was a revelation. For us tonight, it is a slow story, unhurried, about gears that once turned but now rest forever still. In the calm of night, imagine those gears moving again, not loudly but softly, a steady circular motion, patient and inevitable, like the rhythm of your breath as you sink deeper into rest. The machine does not speak, but if it did, it would whisper only of cycles, of repetition, of time measured in circles, always returning, always moving, never rushing. Let that image remain with you, quiet and unbroken, as you allow your body to drift further toward sleep, carried by the forgotten gears of an ancient world. As the study of the Antikythera mechanism deepened, scholars began to notice not only the gears, but also faint inscriptions on the surviving fragments. These tiny letters, almost erased by time, offered clues to the original purpose of the device. They were written in ancient Greek, carefully etched into the bronze surface, perhaps as instructions for the user or as labels to mark the dials. Under magnification and careful lighting, words emerged, describing cycles of the moon, the timing of eclipses, and references to calendar systems used across the Hellenistic world. It was as if the mechanism had been a teaching tool as well as a practical instrument, something that not only performed calculations, but also guided the user in understanding them. The presence of such inscriptions confirmed that this was no random collection of parts. It was a deliberate construction with both form and function, designed for an audience that valued knowledge of the heavens. Consider how extraordinary it must have felt to operate this device in its own time. Imagine a Greek scholar turning a small handle, watching as dials slowly rotated, as indicators aligned to show the date of a future eclipse. For people accustomed to seeing the sky as a realm of mystery and omen, the ability to predict such events would have seemed close to divine. Yet here, enclosed in a wooden box, was a machine that revealed the logic beneath the wonder, a quiet tool that translated the cosmos into numbers and circles. The very thought that someone 2,000 years ago could predict the shadow of the moon crossing the sun is enough to remind us of the hidden depths of ancient knowledge. And yet, despite its brilliance, the mechanism was fragile. Built of bronze and wood, it could not withstand centuries of dampness and corrosion. The one we know survived only by accident. carried down to the seabed by the sinking of a ship. Without that shipwreck, we might never have known that such a device had existed. History often depends on chance, on the fragile chain of events that preserves one fragment while losing countless others. How many inventions, how many insights, how many forgotten crafts lie buried where no diver will ever reach? The Antikythera mechanism is a rare survivor, a single whisper from a chorus now silent. For modern scholars, reconstructing its workings has been like piecing together a dream. No complete manual exists. No intact version has been found, only fragments and corrosion. And yet, from those fragments, a vision emerges of a machine far ahead of its time, one that could have inspired generations if it had not been lost. Think of the quiet patience of the researchers who studied it in the 20th and 21st centuries, spending years examining each line, each gear tooth, each inscription, building models, testing theories, and revising them again. Their work mirrors the patience of the ancient craftsmen, both separated by centuries but united by curiosity. For us tonight, it is not the urgency of discovery that matters, but the slow unfolding of the story itself. There is no need to solve every mystery, no need to demand every answer. It is enough to imagine the corroded fragments resting in a museum, displayed under soft light, while visitors pass quietly, some pausing in wonder, others moving on without a second glance. The gears remain still, silent, unmoving, and yet in our minds they continue to turn, gently, endlessly, like the steady rhythm of waves against a shore. As you listen, you can let that rhythm guide you too, slow and unhurried, into deeper calm. The Antikythera mechanism has traveled across millennia to rest here in your imagination tonight, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a companion in stillness, reminding you that even the most complex creations of human hands can become nothing more than gentle fragments in the flow of time. And as that thought settles, you can let yourself drift further, carried by the quiet story of forgotten gears, into the ease of sleep. When modern reconstructions of the Antikythera mechanism were finally attempted, they revealed just how carefully the ancient gears must have been planned. Engineers and historians collaborated, drawing diagrams, cutting new bronze wheels, and fitting them together according to the evidence preserved in the fragments. What emerged was not a rough approximation, but a sophisticated machine that could display multiple cycles at once. On the front, dials traced the positions of the sun and moon against the zodiac, showing the progression of days, months, and years. On the back, additional dials revealed the cycle of eclipses, predicted years in advance with surprising accuracy, and even marked the schedule of the Pan-Hellenic Games. The more closely the models were studied, the clearer it became that the mechanism was not a curiosity, but a deliberate and highly functional tool. It was, in essence, an ancient analog computer, designed to compress the complexities of celestial motion into the turning of gears. For centuries, we had imagined that such thinking began only with the mechanical clocks of the Middle Ages or the scientific instruments of the Renaissance. Yet here, buried in corrosion, was proof that the idea of mechanized knowledge had already been conceived 2 millennia earlier. Picture the wooden case as it must have looked when new, polished smooth, with inscriptions clearly visible, the dials neatly marked, and a small handle on the side. A scholar, or perhaps a wealthy sailor, could set the machine, turn the crank, and watch as the heavens themselves were mirrored in the steady turning of bronze wheels. The elegance of the device lay not in ornament, but in precision. Every tooth on every gear had been cut to match a specific mathematical ratio, ensuring that as one wheel turned, another followed at exactly the right pace. It was not a toy. It was a triumph of applied mathematics, shaped by hand into metal. Scholars have often wondered who might have built it. Some suggest a connection to the school of Hipparchus, the great astronomer of Rhodes, whose work on lunar cycles and celestial models closely matches the calculations embodied in the gears. Others point to Archimedes, whose reputation for mechanical ingenuity was legendary, though whether his influence extended directly to this mechanism is uncertain. What matters is that the knowledge existed, passed down through generations of thinkers, craftsmen, and sailors who needed to understand the skies above them. The ancient world was not as primitive as we sometimes imagine. Behind the marble statues and amphitheaters, there were workshops where minds quietly toiled over calculations, turning numbers into motion. And yet, despite the brilliance of the mechanism, it vanished from history, leaving only this single fractured example, Did others exist? Were they destroyed in wars, melted for their bronze, or simply lost to time? The silence of the record offers no answers. It is possible that the Antikythera mechanism was unique, the product of a single inspired craftsman. It is also possible that it was one of many, scattered across the Mediterranean, used by scholars and navigators until the knowledge faded. Either way, its survival is a miracle of chance. If the ship had not sunk, if divers had not discovered the wreck, if scholars had not examined the fragments, the world today might still be unaware that such technology had ever existed. As you think of this fragile chain of events, let it remind you of how much of history is built on chance and how easily knowledge can vanish. For tonight, it is not a tragedy, but a gentle thought, a reminder that human achievement is as fleeting as the waves that cover the seabed. The gears no longer turn, but in your imagination they continue their patient circles, unhurried and eternal, like the quiet rhythm of your breath as you drift deeper into rest. As more fragments of the Antikythera mechanism were examined with modern tools, the story of its discovery and preservation grew even more remarkable. The divers who first brought it up from the seabed had no idea what they had found. They were sponge divers, men accustomed to long hours beneath the waves, their heavy helmets filled with the sound of their own breath, their bodies pressed by the weight of the sea. When they stumbled upon the wreck in 1900, they were searching for sponges, not history. The wreck was filled with statues and bronze figures, treasures that were dazzling enough on their own, and yet among those treasures lay the small corroded lump that seemed almost worthless at first glance. When the fragments were handed to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, curators focused on the statues and the works of art, placing the strange lump aside as a curiosity. For years, it drew little attention, and only gradually did scholars begin to suspect that it was more than corrosion. In 1902, the archaeologist Valerios Stias noticed gear teeth visible on one of the fragments, and it was this observation that first suggested the possibility of a mechanical device. Still, the idea was too strange to be accepted quickly. Scholars hesitated, doubting that the ancient Greeks could have produced such technology. The fragment sat quietly, half forgotten once again. Decades passed, wars shook Europe, museums closed and reopened, and only in the mid-20th century did more serious study begin. Researchers like Derek de Solla Price in the 1950s and 60s dedicated years to understanding the fragments. Price used X-ray images to map the internal structure of the mechanism, producing diagrams that revealed a network of gears more complex than anything else known from antiquity. His work suggested that the device could predict eclipses and follow lunar cycles, a claim so extraordinary that many resisted believing it. Yet piece by piece, the evidence was undeniable. Later studies, using more advanced imaging, confirmed and expanded upon his findings. The mechanism was not a hoax, not an accident, but a deliberate, astonishing construction. Consider how close it came to being lost forever. Had the ship sunk in deeper water? Had the divers chosen another path? Had the fragments been discarded as useless corrosion we might never have known? And even after discovery, had Stace not noticed the faint gear teeth, or had Price not devoted years to the fragments, the story might have ended in silence. The survival of the Antikythera mechanism is a chain of fragile chances, each one necessary to carry it to us. As you reflect on this, imagine the fragments resting now in glass cases, illuminated under soft museum light, their broken edges and fused bronze speaking of centuries beneath the sea. Visitors lean in to look at them, but many do not understand what they are seeing. To most, they appear as simple pieces of corroded metal. Only with explanation does the wonder become clear. The thought is calming in its way, because it shows how history holds secrets in plain sight, waiting for patient eyes to notice. Tonight, the mechanism is not a puzzle for you to solve, but an image to rest upon. Picture the divers surfacing in 1900, their helmets heavy, their arms weary, their voices muffled as they haul strange artifacts onto the deck of their ship. Picture the museum curators stacking statues and pottery, setting aside the small fragment without realizing its importance. Picture the slow unfolding of recognition, one step at a time, across decades. Nothing happens quickly, nothing is rushed, everything unfolds at the pace of patience. And in the same way, you can let your thoughts move slowly, unhurried, through these images. allowing your breath to match the steady rhythm of time itself. The Antikythera mechanism rests quietly, no longer turning, but in your imagination its gears continue to move, soft and eternal, lulling you further into calm and sleep. By the late 20th century, the Antikythera mechanism had become more than a curiosity. It was a subject of fascination that challenged everything historians thought they knew about the limits of ancient technology. Teams of scientists from Greece, Britain, and other countries collaborated to unlock its secrets, applying ever more advanced techniques. Computed tomography scans allowed researchers to see inside the corroded fragments without damaging them, revealing gear trains hidden deep within the bronze. These scans showed inscriptions too faint to be visible by eye, lines of ancient Greek text that described cycles of time and astronomical events. Each new discovery made the mechanism seem even more extraordinary. The gears were cut with precision that would not be seen again for more than 1,000 years, their ratios carefully chosen to reflect the complex motions of the heavens. Some gears were designed to mimic the irregular orbit of the moon, using what is called an epicyclic system, something that required a deep understanding of celestial mathematics. For an ancient craftsman to have achieved this is astonishing, yet the fragments prove that it was done. As reconstructions became more detailed, replicas of the device were built, some in brass, some in digital simulations. These models demonstrated how the mechanism could show the date of eclipses decades in advance, how it could align the cycles of the sun and moon with the calendar, and how it could even predict the timing of the ancient games. The thought of such a device being used in antiquity is quietly remarkable. Imagine a scholar standing before an audience, turning the crank of the mechanism, and explaining how in 2 years' time, an eclipse would pass across the land, not as an omen of disaster, but as a natural event that could be foreseen. Imagine the mixture of awe and reassurance such a demonstration might have inspired. Yet even with these reconstructions, many mysteries remain. We do not know whether the mechanism was common or rare, whether it was the culmination of a long tradition or the work of a single genius whose knowledge died with him. We do not know why no other examples have been found, despite centuries of exploration and excavation. Was the knowledge lost in the turmoil of wars, in the burning of libraries, or simply in the indifference of time? These unanswered questions are not troubling tonight, but soothing, gentle reminders that history always holds more than we can see. The Antikythera mechanism stands as a quiet testimony that the past is richer, more layered than we often believe. As you picture it in your mind, let the image settle softly, a corroded fragment, silent in its glass case, yet within it, a whole cosmos once turned in miniature. Let your breathing match the imagined turning of those gears, steady and calm, a rhythm without hurry, a circle without end. The mechanism does not speak, yet its silence is eloquent, telling us that even forgotten knowledge can survive in fragments, waiting to be noticed again. And just as scholars waited patiently for its secrets, so too can you rest patiently now, letting thoughts drift unhurried, letting sleep approach at its own pace, as the quiet story of ancient gears accompanies you deeper into calm. When the Antikythera mechanism is considered within the broader history of science, it takes on an even greater significance. For centuries, historians believed that complex mechanical devices did not exist in the ancient world, that such precision belonged only to the Renaissance or later. Yet the corroded gears tell a different story, one in which knowledge once bloomed earlier than expected and then quietly disappeared. The Greeks had long been skilled in mathematics and astronomy, with scholars like Hipparchus and Ptolemy recording observations of the skies. But the mechanism suggests that their theories were not limited to words and diagrams. Someone had the idea to embody them in metal, to create a device that made the invisible motions of the heavens tangible, something that could be held in the hands and turned with a crank. It is an idea so familiar to us now, with our clocks, calculators, and computers. Yet in antiquity, it must have seemed extraordinary. To imagine that 2,000 years ago, a craftsman stood at a workbench filing teeth into a bronze gear, not for decoration but for calculation, is to imagine a world where science and craft were intertwined more closely than we think. The existence of the mechanism raises questions about what was lost when the ancient world collapsed into centuries of turmoil. If knowledge of such devices had survived, might the scientific revolution have come much earlier? Could mechanical computing have been developed in the Roman world or the Byzantine era? We cannot know, and in truth, the thought is less urgent than it seems. For tonight, it is not about speculation, but about the quiet awareness that history is full of missed possibilities. The Antikythera mechanism is not a symbol of failure, but of hidden richness, a fragment that whispers of how far the human mind can reach when curiosity guides the hand. When visitors see it today in the museum, some walk past quickly, their eyes caught instead by the statues and golden jewelry. Others pause, puzzled by the rough mass of corroded bronze behind the glass. Only with explanation does the wonder unfold, only when the guide or the placard explains that inside those fragments are gears. More than 2 millennia old, does the true weight of the object become clear. Yet even then, it remains silent, not performing, not turning, only hinting at what it once could do. This stillness is part of its charm, a reminder that not every mystery of the past must be fully awakened. In your imagination, you may picture it whole, the wooden case restored, the dials polished, the gears turning smoothly, but you may also leave it as it is, resting, broken, peaceful. Both images are gentle and unhurried. Both are suitable companions for sleep. The mechanism does not demand attention. It offers quiet company, a fragment of the past that survived against the odds, not to astonish loudly, but to remind softly. As you lie still, let your mind follow the slow turning of imaginary gears, circles within circles, ratios aligning, cycles repeating. Let the thought carry you further into calm, where time itself seems to slow, where the rhythm of history merges with the rhythm of your breath. The forgotten gears of Antikythera are no longer forgotten tonight, for they rest here with you, steady and patient, guiding you deeper into rest. When we think of the Antikythera mechanism today, it is easy to imagine it as a singular miracle, an isolated fragment of genius, yet perhaps it was once part of a broader tradition now lost to time. The precision of its gears suggests that the craftsman who built it was not working in isolation, but drew upon knowledge that must have been taught, practiced, and refined over generations. Metalworking of such delicacy does not spring from nothing. It requires tools, apprentices, and a culture that values careful observation of the sky. It may have been one of several such devices, perhaps commissioned by wealthy patrons who wished to impress guests with their ability to predict the heavens. Or it may have been rare, a prototype never fully replicated. We will never know, but imagining its world gives us a glimpse of how sophisticated ancient society could be. Picture a gathering in a Greek port city, perhaps in Rhodes or Alexandria, where merchants, sailors, and scholars met. A wooden box is brought forward, the crank turned, and the dials begin to align. Onlookers watch as the operator explains when the next eclipse will occur, or when the next games will be held, or how the moon will wax and wane over the months to come. The audience may not understand the mathematics, but they can see the order of the cosmos revealed by the turning of wheels. In that moment, the mechanism bridges the gap between abstract knowledge and tangible reality. Such scenes, though imagined, remind us that knowledge has always had a role not only in discovery, but also in wonder. The mechanism, silent now, once spoke of human curiosity, of a desire to understand and to predict. And yet, just as easily as it appeared, it disappeared. Wars raged across the Mediterranean, empires rose and fell, libraries burned, and with them, knowledge scattered. The mechanism sank with its ship, lying in silence while centuries passed above, and with its silence, the memory of such machines faded. What survived were myths, philosophies, and fragments of writing, but not the machines themselves. Only with its rediscovery did we realize what had been forgotten. And perhaps that is the true lesson. History is not a straight line of progress, but a series of gains and losses, of insights preserved and insights lost. For every fragment we uncover, countless others are gone beyond recall. That thought is not troubling tonight. Instead, it is calming, reminding us of the vastness of time and the smallness of any single moment. The mechanism reminds us that even the most advanced achievements can vanish into obscurity, becoming nothing more than corroded fragments. And yet, those fragments are enough to remind us of the brilliance that once was. As you let these thoughts rest in your mind, imagine the corroded pieces under museum lights, their green and brown surfaces quiet, their gears frozen forever, And imagine also the full device as it once was, polished, turning, alive with motion. Hold both images gently, side by side, without urgency or need to choose between them. Let the turning of imagined gears mirror the rhythm of your breathing, steady and slow, circles within circles, calming and endless. The forgotten gears of Antikythera are no longer only a story of the past. They are part of your night now, a gentle companion as you drift deeper into stillness and into sleep. As the story of the Antikythera mechanism comes to a gentle close, it is worth reflecting on the quiet path that carried it across millennia. A ship once sailed the Aegean, heavy with statues, bronze, and treasures, its crew unaware that hidden in their cargo was a device that would outlive them all. The sea claimed it, the centuries buried it, and only by accident did it return to light. Divers seeking sponges instead pulled up fragments of history. Scholars overlooked them at first, then slowly began to notice, until patient eyes and advancing technology revealed the truth. And now, more than 2,000 years later, you are listening to its story, carried not by waves, but by words, not by gears, but by the rhythm of thought. The Antikythera mechanism has become a bridge between past and present, not because it still works, but because its silence invites us to imagine. We imagine the craftsman filing bronze teeth, the scholar turning the crank, the audience marveling at predictions of eclipses. We imagine the ship sinking, the wreck resting, the fragments corroding, and the divers surfacing, heavy with artifacts. We imagine the scholars of the 20th century peering at X-rays, tracing lines, building models, and we imagine the visitors today who lean close to the museum glass, puzzled at first, then amazed as they read the placard. Each moment is part of the story, but none of it hurries. The gears have stopped, yet their rhythm continues in memory. Tonight, that rhythm can guide you too. Time measured in circles, cycles repeating, patterns returning, like the rise and fall of your breath. In the mechanism, we see both brilliance and fragility, a reminder that human achievement can be great, and yet it can vanish. Knowledge is not guaranteed. It is carried only so long as someone remembers, teaches, and builds. But even when forgotten, it may still return, in fragments, whispering softly. That whisper is enough. For tonight, the Antikythera mechanism is not a puzzle to solve, not a relic to analyze, but a companion for sleep. Its gears are corroded, its dials are broken, yet in imagination they move smoothly, endlessly, patiently. Let that image settle in your mind. Bronze wheels turning quietly in the dark, each tooth fitting into the next, steady and calm, without beginning and without end. As you drift deeper, let go of questions, let go of time, let the forgotten gears carry you into the gentle silence of rest. The sea is quiet now, the wreck is still, the museum is hushed, and the night is yours. The previous story has now come to an end. Before we begin our next tale, I kindly ask you to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you can join us every night on our journey into calm sleep. And now, let us continue with another chapter in our series of boring history for sleep, as we drift into the sleepy history of the compass. The compass, a simple instrument with a needle that points north, is today so common that we rarely pause to consider how mysterious it must once have seemed. For countless generations before its invention, sailors, travelers, and soldiers had relied on the stars, the sun, and the lay of the land to guide them. Journeys were risky, and the sea in particular was unforgiving, for clouds could hide the heavens and storms could strip away any sense of direction. Then, slowly, in the heart of ancient China, an idea began to take shape. Around 2,000 years ago, scholars and artisans discovered that certain stones, known as lodestones, possessed a curious property. When freely suspended, they aligned themselves with the north and south. At first, this was treated as a curiosity, a natural wonder rather than a practical tool. Lodestones were sometimes placed in bowls of water, where they floated on bits of wood or reed, quietly aligning themselves with the invisible pull of the earth. Early Chinese texts described these stones as magical, capable of guiding not only journeys, but even spiritual practices. Over time, however, the potential for navigation became clear. Imagine an ancient artisan carefully shaping a lodestone, carving it into a spoon-like form that would rest on a polished bronze plate. When the spoon was set upon the plate, it would turn of its own accord, its handle pointing south. To those who saw it for the first time, This must have seemed like a secret of the Earth itself, a hidden force revealed through the patience of experiment. Gradually, what began as a curiosity in natural philosophy became a tool for direction. By the time of the Han Dynasty, references appear to such instruments being used to guide journeys across land. They were not yet the compasses we know, delicate with needles and cases, but they were a beginning. The Earth itself, it seemed, carried a map within its pull. As centuries passed, the idea of the compass spread and changed. Sailors who once feared drifting helplessly in fog or darkness could now imagine carrying with them a device that whispered of direction even when the skies were hidden. This thought alone changed how people looked at the world. Journeys no longer depended only on clear nights and steady stars. They could be guided by the quiet certainty of a stone aligned with the unseen. Picture the slow progress of this knowledge spreading outward from China, carried along the Silk Road, whispered among traders, written into texts that would later be read by travelers far from their origin. At first, the compass was not perfect, nor widely understood, but it carried within it the seed of transformation. For tonight, it is enough to imagine those early experiments: bowls of water and floating slivers of stone, artisans carving spoons that moved without touch, scholars leaning over them in wonder. Nothing hurried, nothing loud, only the patient unfolding of discovery, the quiet recognition that the Earth itself offered guidance. As you lie in stillness, let the thought rest in your mind like that spoon upon the plate, slowly turning until it finds its direction, steady and calm. The history of the compass begins not with voyages across oceans, but with quiet observation, with simple stones and gentle hands, with patience that revealed a secret hidden all along. And as those lodestones turned in silence, so too can your thoughts turn tonight, unhurried, steady, guiding you deeper into rest. As the centuries unfolded, the quiet discovery of the lodestone slowly transformed into the beginnings of a true navigational compass. In ancient China, artisans continued to refine the spoon-shaped devices, polishing them carefully so they could rest smoothly on bronze plates and turn without friction. The movement seemed almost alive, as if the Earth itself were whispering directions through the stone. While at first these compasses were used in geomancy and rituals of feng shui, helping people align buildings and graves with what they believed to be the natural order of the world, it did not take long for more practical minds to realize that such instruments could guide travel as well. To step beyond the familiar boundaries of one's village or valley required courage, and the idea of carrying with you an object that always pointed the same way must have been a comfort unlike any other. Gradually, the compass moved from land to sea. Sailors who had relied for centuries on the stars began to test these lodestone devices aboard their vessels. Imagine a ship moving across the waters of the South China Sea, the sky heavy with clouds that concealed both sun and stars. Without the compass, sailors would have been left with guesswork and memory. But with the spoon-shaped lodestone, they could still trace their direction, trusting the Earth's pull rather than the shifting surface of the waves. It was a change so subtle and yet so profound that it altered the course of history. The earliest seafarers who carried compasses may not have understood why the stones aligned as they did. To them, it might have seemed a mystery of nature, a quiet magic that demanded no explanation. But they trusted it, and trust was enough. Over time, the instrument was refined. Artisans began suspending slender slivers of magnetized iron on silk threads, allowing the needle to turn more freely than the heavy spoon had. The bowl of water was replaced by simpler designs, cases that could be carried easily, needles mounted on pivots that pointed steadily to the south in China or to the north in other lands. With each refinement, the compass grew more practical, more portable, more powerful as a tool of exploration. As this knowledge spread westward along trade routes, it reached the Islamic world, where scholars recognized its value for navigation across deserts and seas alike. From there, it journeyed further, reaching medieval Europe, where sailors facing the storms of the Atlantic began to depend upon it as never before. The story of the spread is long and gradual, but at its heart lies the same image: a small needle turning quietly, aligning itself with the unseen. The compass did not shout of its power. It simply pointed, steady and unyielding, while travelers learned to trust it. For tonight, it is enough to imagine those early voyages: the creak of wooden ships, the flap of sails in the wind, the anxious glances of sailors as clouds obscured the stars, and then the quiet reassurance of a needle that remained steady, unbothered by the storm. The compass, in its simplicity, offered calm in chaos, direction in uncertainty, and as you picture it resting in its case, pointing always north or south, you may let your own thoughts settle in the same way, aligned, steady, guided. The world outside may shift like waves, but the compass remains, a patient companion across centuries, reminding us even now of the quiet strength of direction. By the time the compass reached Europe in the Middle Ages, it had already traveled a long road from its origins in ancient China. Knowledge of the device spread slowly along the Silk Road, carried by traders who moved not only silk and spices, but also ideas, instruments, and stories. In the Islamic world, scholars studied the compass carefully, adapting it for use not only in navigation, but also in determining the direction of Mecca for daily prayers. This connection between science, faith, and daily life gave the compass an even deeper importance, embedding it into cultures that valued both spiritual order and practical guidance. When the compass finally arrived in Europe, it found sailors who were facing the vast uncertainty of the open Atlantic. Before its arrival, navigation in Europe depended largely on coastal sailing, where land was always in sight, or on clear skies that revealed the stars. Venturing farther into the ocean was a dangerous gamble. The compass changed this. With a small needle floating or pivoting in a case, sailors could now hold direction even in thick fog or stormy weather. Picture a medieval ship, wooden and heavy, creaking as it pressed into waves. The crew huddles below deck, fearful of the storm outside, while the navigator consults the small box that carries the compass. The needle trembles with the movement of the ship, but always returns to its place, steady, unyielding. The navigator breathes easier, for even though the sea is vast and the storm is fierce, the ship has a guide. It is a simple image, yet it transformed exploration. The compass allowed sailors to venture farther from home than ever before, to cross waters they once dared not cross. It played a quiet but essential role in the great voyages that reshaped the map of the world, from the exploration of the Atlantic to the rounding of Africa's Cape of Good Hope, and eventually the crossing of the Pacific. Yet the compass itself did not change much in appearance. It remained a small, unassuming object, its power hidden in its consistency. Scholars of the time did not fully understand why it worked. They spoke of hidden forces, of natural magnetism, of properties bestowed upon certain stones by the earth itself. Some explanations were mystical, others more rational, but none could fully capture the reality of the Earth's magnetic field. Still, the mystery did not matter. What mattered was that the compass worked, and its steady direction gave courage to journeys that once seemed impossible. In this way, the compass was both a scientific tool and a quiet companion of human imagination. It represented trust in something unseen, a willingness to step into uncertainty, guided only by the pull of a needle. As you think of this tonight, let the image settle in your mind, the small compass resting in the hand of a sailor, the ship rising and falling on waves, the sky hidden by clouds, and yet direction remains clear. The world may shift, but the compass points steady. That is its gift, and its story is one of patience, subtlety, and breadth, and reassurance. Just as travelers trusted its silent guidance, you may trust the calm it offers now, letting its steady north become the rhythm of your thoughts, guiding you gently toward rest. As the compass became more widely used across Europe, it slowly began to change in form as well as in function. The earliest compasses in Europe often used a simple magnetized needle floated on water, trembling lightly with the motion of the ship, but always finding its way back to the same direction. Over time, mariners began to mount the needle on a pivot, allowing it to turn more freely inside a small protective box. This innovation, combined with the addition of a compass card marked with directions, made the instrument easier to read, even for sailors unfamiliar with the science behind it. The card, divided into points like north, east, south, and west, turned the invisible pull of the earth into something visible and practical. With this, the compass became not only a scientific curiosity, but an everyday tool of the sea. Picture a medieval navigator standing at the stern of a ship, holding the compass box steady in his hands as waves crashed around him. The needle quivers but steadies, aligning with the marks on the card. Around him, the crew looks anxious, the ocean stretching endlessly in every direction, clouds covering the sky, and yet the navigator feels a quiet certainty. He gives his directions calmly, and the ship stays on course. This simple scene was repeated countless times, and in those repetitions, history changed. The compass was central to the great age of exploration that followed. With it, sailors dared to leave the safety of coastlines and strike out across open seas. They reached new lands, connected continents, and in doing so reshaped trade, culture, and empires. It is striking to think that so much of human history, voyages of discovery, encounters of cultures, the spread of goods and ideas, depended on a small piece of magnetized metal turning in a box, and yet, the compass itself remained humble. It did not dazzle with ornament. It did not announce its power loudly. It pointed steadily, without fail, and those who trusted it reached places they might never otherwise have seen. Of course, not all voyages ended safely, and not all discoveries were peaceful. The compass did not guarantee success, only direction. But it made possible what once seemed impossible, and for centuries it was regarded with a mixture of trust and awe. Scholars debated how it worked, whether the Earth itself contained hidden forces, whether the poles were drawing the needle like invisible stars. The true explanation would come much later with the study of magnetism, but for most of history, the mystery was part of its charm. For sailors, the compass was less about understanding than about trusting. As long as it pointed true, it was enough. And so it guided caravels across the Atlantic, galleons through storms, and small fishing boats along misty coasts. Each journey depended on its quiet direction. Tonight, as you listen, imagine the steady needle inside its box, turning gently until it finds north. Imagine the calm it must have given to sailors on restless seas. Let that calm be yours as well. Just as the compass pointed the way through storm and fog, so too can its story guide you gently now, not across oceans, but into the deeper waters of rest. The compass does not hurry, it waits, patient, unchanging, reminding us that even in uncertainty there can be direction. And with that thought, you can let your breathing slow, your mind steady, and your body drift further into sleep. As the centuries moved onward, the compass continued to evolve, shaped by the needs of sailors and the curiosity of scholars. By the 15th and 16th centuries, during the height of the great voyages of exploration, the compass had become an indispensable companion on every major journey. Portuguese navigators relied upon it as they traced the coastlines of Africa. Spanish explorers carried it across the Atlantic in search of unknown lands, and merchants from Venice and Genoa kept it close as they ventured farther into the Mediterranean and beyond. The simple magnetized needle, steady and unchanging, gave courage to those who faced the vastness of the sea. At times, the compass was treated almost as a mystical object, a small device that seemed to hold within it the power of the earth itself. Some sailors believed it was infused with a secret force, while others thought it might be tied to the stars. Theories multiplied, some fanciful, some practical, yet all agreed on one thing: the compass worked, and that was enough to place trust in it. Picture the scene of a ship leaving Lisbon in the 15th century, the air filled with the cries of seagulls and the creak of ropes as sails are unfurled. The navigator holds a wooden box with a pivot-mounted needle inside. He checks its direction, marks the course, and gives his orders. The crew may not understand how the device works, but they see its steady guidance, and they take comfort from it. Over weeks and months at sea, when the horizon seems endless and storms threaten to overwhelm, the compass remains a source of calm. Its needle wavers with the ship's motion, but always it returns, pointing to the same direction, a reminder that even in chaos there can be constancy. The spread of the compass also encouraged advances in map-making, with direction more reliably fixed. Cartographers could draw coastlines with greater accuracy, and navigators could plot courses that were more ambitious than before. Step by step, the world grew smaller, not because the seas were less vast, but because the compass gave humans the confidence to cross them. Without it, voyages might still have been attempted, but far fewer would have succeeded. The compass thus stands quietly behind some of the greatest turning points in history, unseen but essential. And yet, despite its importance, it remained a modest object, no larger than a hand, often housed in a plain wooden case. Unlike grand astrolabes or intricate globes, the compass was simple, direct, and humble. It needed no decoration, for its power lay in its reliability. Tonight, as you think of it, imagine holding such a compass, feeling its weight in your palm, watching the needle tremble and then steady, always pointing the same way. Let that image rest in your mind as a symbol of quiet guidance. Just as countless sailors once trusted it to guide them through storms, you may let it guide your thoughts tonight, away from the turbulence of the day and toward the calm of sleep. The compass does not ask questions, it does not hurry, it simply points, steady and true, and in its patience you may find rest. As exploration expanded in the centuries that followed, the compass continued to sit quietly at the heart of every voyage, its small needle guiding vast journeys across oceans. By the time of the Renaissance, when Europe was awakening to new ideas and discoveries, the compass was no longer a curiosity, but a necessity. Alongside the astrolabe and the cross-staff, it formed part of the navigator's essential tools. Yet, unlike those more complicated instruments, the compass was simple enough to be trusted by sailors of all ranks. It pointed north, or in China, south, and that was all that mattered. On ships crossing the Atlantic, the compass was consulted again and again, not only by navigators, but by anxious captains who needed reassurance as days stretched into weeks and land remained unseen. Picture a long voyage in the 16th century. The wooden vessel creaks with every wave, its sails filled by winds that seem endless, its crew weary from rationed food and uncertain hope. The stars are often hidden by clouds, and the waves roll in monotonous rhythm, but in the navigator's hands lies a small box with a trembling needle. He steadies it, watches it align, and confirms the direction. His voice, calm and measured, carries to the captain, the course is true. And with that, the journey continues. Without the compass, such voyages might have faltered. With it, entire continents were reached, trade routes were established, and empires began to grow. Yet the compass itself remained unchanged in its essence, a needle drawn by the invisible pull of the earth. Scholars of the time still puzzled over its mysteries. Some thought the needle was drawn by distant stars, others believed it responded to hidden currents within the earth, and many treated it with reverence, half scientific and half mystical. The true understanding of magnetism was centuries away, but the practical use of the compass required no explanation. Sailors trusted it because it worked, and that trust reshaped the world. Even on smaller scales, the compass mattered deeply. Fishermen setting out from coastal villages carried them to find their way back through fog. Traders crossing inland routes used them to keep steady direction, and armies marching across unfamiliar landscapes found guidance in their silent pointing. The compass was not only for grand discoveries, it was for ordinary journeys too, for every person who needed assurance when the world grew confusing. As maps improved and voyages grew longer, the compass was refined further. Needles were mounted more securely, compass cards were marked more clearly, and cases were built sturdier to withstand the rolling of ships. Still, the heart of the instrument never changed. It remained a tool of patience, quiet and unassuming, yet central to the unfolding of history. Tonight, as you think of it, imagine that small needle resting inside its box, quivering slightly with the movement of the ship, but always returning, always pointing the same way. Imagine the relief it must have given to tired sailors, the calm it must have offered to captains facing uncertainty. And then let that calm extend to you, here and now. The compass points not across oceans for you tonight, but toward rest, guiding your thoughts away from wandering and into stillness. Its story is not one of noise or drama, but of quiet constancy, a reminder that even in the vast and shifting seas of time, there can be something steady, something simple, something true. By the 17th century, the compass had become not only a tool of navigation, but also a subject of growing scientific curiosity. The Renaissance spirit of inquiry had awakened questions about why the needle pointed north, what invisible forces guided it, and whether these forces could be measured or explained. Scholars such as William Gilbert in England began to experiment with magnets, publishing works that laid the foundation for the study of magnetism. Gilbert argued that the Earth itself was a giant magnet, an idea that was revolutionary at the time and helped shift the compass from the realm of mystery into the realm of natural philosophy. Even so, for most sailors, the compass remained simply what it had always been, a quiet guide that needed no explanation. On board a merchant vessel crossing the English Channel, a sailor might check the compass at dawn, note the course, and continue with his duties without a thought for the theories behind it. The needle quivered, steadied, and pointed, and that was all that mattered. In this way, the compass bridged two worlds, the everyday world of practical use and the deeper world of scientific investigation. Imagine a quiet study lined with books, where a scholar sets lodestones on a table, suspends needles on threads, and records their movements with patient precision. The air smells faintly of ink and wax, and the ticking of a clock marks the hours. Now imagine far away at sea, a ship battling wind and wave, where another compass lies in the hands of a navigator who has no interest in theory, but every need for certainty. Both scenes are part of the same story, unfolding together, each giving the compass a place in human history. The 17th and 18th centuries were times of expansion, when nations built empires across the seas, and none of it could have happened without the compass. It guided Dutch traders to the East Indies, Spanish galleons back and forth from the Americas, and English ships to every corner of the globe. The compass was a quiet partner in these vast undertakings, never changing its form much, always modest, always reliable. Yet for all its power, it was still small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. Consider how much of history rests on such small objects, how empires and voyages were shaped by something so unassuming. Tonight, let that thought rest with you, simple and steady. The compass does not demand attention. It does not shout of its role in history. It points, it guides, and it waits. Its patience is its strength, and it mirrors the patience of the sea itself, eternal and unhurried. As you picture the needle resting in its case, pointing steadily north, let your own thoughts align with its calm direction. Like sailors who once trusted it through storm and fog, you may trust it now to guide you into stillness. The compass remains a symbol of quiet constancy, and in its story you may find the same constancy for yourself, a steady guide into rest. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, the compass entered a world that was rapidly changing. The Industrial Revolution was reshaping cities. Machines were beginning to power ships and factories, and science was moving forward with new precision. Yet even as steam engines roared and iron rails stretched across continents, sailors still relied on the same quiet compass that had guided wooden ships for centuries. Its design was refined, its cases sturdier, its needles balanced more delicately, but its essence remained the same. Now, however, it was joined by new companions. Chronometers that told time with remarkable accuracy, sextants that measured angles of the stars, and charts that grew ever more detailed. The compass was no longer alone in guiding voyages, but it remained central, the first tool consulted when direction was uncertain. Imagine a steamship leaving a foggy harbor in the early 19th century. Its engines chug steadily, smoke rising into the gray sky. On the bridge, the captain leans over a binnacle, a tall wooden stand that houses the ship's compass, its face lit softly by an oil lamp. The needle trembles slightly as the vessel moves, but then steadies, pointing the way. The captain adjusts his heading, confident not because he sees land or stars, but because the needle has shown him the truth. In this way, the compass adapted to new ages without losing its simple role. Scholars by then understood more of magnetism. They studied how iron in ships could disturb the needle, and they devised methods to correct it with small compensating magnets placed near the compass. This deeper knowledge did not replace the compass, but made it more reliable than ever, ensuring that even great iron steamships could trust it. By the late 19th century, the compass had become so standard that no vessel, great or small, would dare to leave harbor without one. It was written into maritime law, enshrined as essential, just as natural to a ship as sails or engines. And yet, despite its authority, it remained a humble device, silent and patient. Never more than a needle balanced upon a pivot. Think of the countless hands that steadied themselves upon it. Captains steering through storms, explorers venturing into unknown seas, fishermen finding their way home through mist. Each trusted that small, quivering line. Each found reassurance in its steady return. Tonight, as you picture it, imagine the binnacle on the deck of a ship, its polished wood glowing softly in the lamplight, the compass card turning gently as the ship changes course, the needle aligning once more with the unseen field of the earth. The sea outside may be dark and restless, but within that circle of light, direction is certain. Let that certainty be yours now. Just as the compass gave calm to sailors on stormy nights, so it can give calm to you, guiding your thoughts not across oceans, but into deeper rest. Its story is one of patience and constancy, unchanging across centuries, and it whispers still, steady, steady, steady. By the time the 20th century arrived, the compass had already guided humanity through centuries of voyages, wars, and explorations, and yet it remained as modest and as necessary as ever. On every naval vessel, from small fishing boats to mighty battleships, a compass could be found, housed securely in its binnacle, protected against vibration and weather, its needle floating above a carefully marked card. Pilots who flew the first airplanes also depended on the compass, trusting it to give them direction as they lifted off from fields and flew over unfamiliar landscapes. Long before satellites, before GPS, before radio signals, the compass was the one constant, a steady voice pointing the way in silence. Picture an early aviator in the 1920s, goggles pressed against his face, the roar of an engine filling the small cockpit. Clouds stretch across the sky, obscuring the sun and the ground below. On his dashboard rests a simple compass, its face trembling slightly with the vibrations of the engine. The pilot glances at it again and again, reassured each time by its steady north, trusting it more than his own senses as the horizon disappears into mist. In that small circle of glass and metal lies the difference between being lost and finding the way home. In the vast oceans, too, the compass continued its quiet service. Submarines carried them deep beneath the waves, liners carried them on long transatlantic crossings, and even the smallest coastal boats kept them close at hand. No matter how advanced ships became, no matter how much technology was added to bridges and cockpits, the compass was always present, its role unchanged. Scientists in the 20th century also began to understand magnetism more fully. They studied the Earth's magnetic field, mapped its variations, and even discovered that it shifted over time, wandering slowly across the globe. Yet these discoveries only deepened respect for the compass, for even though the poles drifted and the field shifted, the needle always found its place, faithful to the invisible forces around it. Imagine a naval officer during World War II, standing at his post in the dim glow of a red lamp, scanning maps while the ship moves silently through dangerous waters. Outside, darkness and uncertainty. Inside, the compass card turning slowly, aligning again, offering quiet reassurance. No matter the age or the setting, this small device remained a companion to all who sought direction. Its power lay not in complexity, but in simplicity, not in loud declarations, but in steady whispers. Tonight, as you think of it, let that whisper guide you too. Picture the compass resting in its case, its needle trembling, then settling, pointing with patience that does not waver. The storms of history have passed over it. The machines of industry have surrounded it, but still it points, still it guides. Its story is one of continuity, a reminder that even as the world changes, there are things that remain constant. Let that constancy be yours now. Just as generations before you looked to the compass for guidance, you may look to it tonight for calm, letting its steady north become the rhythm of your rest. As the modern age unfolded and satellites circled high above the Earth, the compass might have seemed destined to fade into memory, replaced by glowing screens and digital voices. Yet even now, in an era of GPS and electronic navigation, the compass remains a quiet companion, unchanged in essence, a needle that still turns to the Earth's magnetic pull. Hikers carry them into forests where cell signals disappear. Sailors keep them aboard ships as backups for electronic systems, and pilots still glance at them even in cockpits filled with advanced instruments. The compass has endured because it embodies a simplicity that technology cannot replace. It does one thing, and it does it faithfully, without power, without noise, without dependence on anything beyond the steady field of the Earth itself. To hold a compass today is to touch centuries of history, to feel the same reassurance that guided ancient sailors on the South China Sea, medieval navigators on the Atlantic, and early aviators above the clouds. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet forest at dusk, the trees tall and silent around you. In your hand is a small compass, its needle trembling lightly before settling to its place. You breathe more easily because, even though the world is wide and paths are uncertain, this small device gives you direction. It has no voice, no screen, no power switch, yet it carries within it the wisdom of ages. For countless generations, it has whispered the same steady truth, pointing the way with patience and calm. Its story, when told from the lodestones of ancient China to the polished brass of modern instruments, is not one of sudden triumph, but of quiet endurance. It is a reminder that progress is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is a matter of trust built over centuries, a steady guide that outlives empires and revolutions. Tonight, as you lie still, you may let that story be yours as well. The compass does not rush, it does not worry. It points and it waits, patient as the earth itself. Let your thoughts become like that needle, trembling for a moment, then finding their place, steady and calm. The storms of the day can be like waves around you, but the compass within remains unshaken, guiding you gently toward rest. As the series of this story comes to a close, imagine all the journeys the compass has guided, all the lives it has reassured, and let it reassure you too. You need not travel seas tonight. You need only drift, slowly and gently, into sleep. The compass will point the way, not to distant lands, but to stillness, to calm, to peace. And as the needle rests at last, so may you. Before you drift fully into sleep, remember that rest comes easier when we treat our nights gently. Try not to go to bed too full. Let your phone rest a little earlier, and allow your mind to slow down from the day. These small habits bring calm, and they help you find deeper, more peaceful sleep. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me tonight. I wish you a restful night and a brighter tomorrow. And until we meet again, may your evenings be calm and your dreams gentle. Good night, and see you in the next story here at Sleep Whisper.